And it's time now to bring in a very special guest. Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, the Congressional Budget Office, came out with a report this week that talked about the Obamacare inspiring job loss. And I know Senator Toomey wants to talk about that this morning. Senator, great to have you on the show.
Gary, thanks very much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to have you in again this morning. Lots going on down in D.C. and lots going on around the country. But one of the things that came out the other day, the CBO director basically came out with a report, or the CBO came out with a report, Congressional Budget Office, and everybody says they're the kind of the referee of the whole deal, reporting that there's Obamacare-inspired job loss coming our way out there. We've talked a little bit about it the last couple of days, but it certainly is disconcerting.
Well, here's my take on this. It's no surprise. I mean, we obviously, you raise the cost of hiring a worker, you're going to have fewer workers. You diminish the incentive to work, you're going to have fewer people working. So we knew that about Obamacare. We knew it from all the anecdotal evidence and stories we've had all over Pennsylvania and all over the country. But here's what's shocking, Gary. The shocking thing is that the administration seems to think this is a good thing.
Yeah.
How did we get to the point in America when it became a good idea for the government to create an incentive for people to remain poor? How did it become a good idea for government to encourage people to not work and not support their family and build a better life for themselves? And frankly, when did it become a good idea to try to trap people in poverty by creating incentives to stay stuck in a situation that they might be able to improve on? This is unbelievable to me. I mean, I'm not surprised that CBO comes up with this report, but I'm shocked that the administration comes out and says 2.5 million fewer jobs is a good thing.
Well, and one of the things, too, that really is insidious in all this, and I was reading a little thing in Fact Check the other day on the Washington Post, and he said, no, the CBO did not say Obamacare will kill 2 million jobs. No, it won't. But what's more insidious and deeper than this is the fact that people might decide to work part-time, not full-time, in order to be getting health care subsidies. Thus, they reduce the supply of labor to the market. Other people near retirement age might decide they no longer need to hold on to their job just because it provides health insurance, and they also leave the workforce. And the idea here is that we have provided a false set of choices that really encourage more dependence on government subsidies than going out and independently working on your own and creating more independence for yourself.
Well, that's exactly right. And throughout all of American history, the story of success, the story of moving up into the middle class, the story of moving out of poverty has always necessarily included hard work. Work is honorable. Work is to be respected. Any kind of work, if people put in an honest day's work, we've got to honor that, respect that, and celebrate that. And here we are saying, if you'd rather just not bother, that's fine too, and we'll create incentives, and we'll celebrate the fact that we create incentives to discourage that. I think it's a sad day when the government of the United States, in the form of this administration, could take that position.
I'm going to scold you for a second, because one of the things I hate to hear is moving up into the middle class. I don't remember as a kid ever saying to Mom, my lifetime dream is to move up into the middle class. My lifetime dream was to do the very best I could do in a country that allows me to do that. And I hear the president say that all the time, and it just every time I hear anyone says it just grates on my teeth, because it's working toward minimums, not maximums. I mean, our country is about maximums, isn't it?
Well, okay. I mean, I understand your personal view on that, but frankly, I think it's okay, and I think it's true that a lot of working poor and people who grew up in abject poverty, frankly, it's okay to aspire to be in the middle class. That's where most Americans are.
But should we be talking about classes in this country? I mean, we're doing too much of that anymore, I think. And Republicans and Democrats alike are guilty of this. I think we need to talk about being able to live the American dream, being able to live and support ourselves and do those things. And I think this idea of class really tears away at the whole conversation.
Well, I understand that. I have a slightly different take on it, but
and I respect
fundamentally, we're in agreement here. What we want is an upwardly mobile society. We want people to be ambitious, to work as hard as they can. We know that people not only advance their material well-being, but the satisfaction you have from knowing that you worked hard and you provided for your family and you're getting ahead, whether you call it the middle class or whether you refer to it in some other way. That drive, that ambition, that hope, that's what's good for America. It's good for families. It's good for the kids growing up in those families to see their parents doing this, and for the administration to say, it's perfectly fine. In fact, it's desirable to kill 2.5 million such opportunities is just terrible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that part. I mean, but again, I think if Republicans could, and conservatives out there, and not even that, real Main Street type Americans could start talking about here's what we want to do to make our country better, and the old rising tide lifts all ships would be more of a way of looking at it. Just my own particular bias. So you know me well enough, Pat, that I'm being honest about it. Now, when we come back, you are a little concerned about a guy that might be appointed to the federal government. It's going to come before the Senate shortly, and we wanted to get into that when we come back. Senator Pat Toomey, a very special guest this morning. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with him here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. We're with Pat Toomey, our senator here from the state of Pennsylvania. Pat, there is an interesting assignment coming up. President Obama has nominated a top U.S. Justice Department official who turns out to have been a lawyer for Mumia Abu-Jamal. A lot of people won't remember him, but he was convicted of murdering an officer, Daniel Faulkner, 25, in Center City, Philadelphia, the night of December 9th of 1981. He was sentenced to death, although that penalty was overturned. A lot of people over the years, celebrities and otherwise, have come to the side of Mumia Abu-Jamal. But this guy who is up for nomination, and I think you say his name, Debo, is it Adegbile?
Adegbella.
Adegbella. I want to make sure I say that correctly. He is nominated to head the Civil Rights Division now of the Justice Department, and you have been very, very adamant and vocal about that, along with, I think, District Attorney Seth Williams, who happens to be a Democrat.
Gary, this is a very bad choice for someone to head the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. You're right. It was back in 1981 that a Philadelphia police officer was murdered in cold blood on a Philadelphia street by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Shot the officer in the back, and as he fell to the ground, he pumped several more bullets into him, the last one into his face. This murderer then bragged about having murdered this cop in cold blood. There were 4 eyewitnesses. He was convicted by a jury, a jury that, by the way, consisted of white and African American jurors, convicted and sentenced to death. And they proceeded then, they being various members of the legal committee and various left-wing groups, proceeded to turn Mumia Abu-Jamal into some kind of celebrity.
Right.
I mean, it's just appalling. They tried to make the argument repeatedly over many years that he was somehow unfairly convicted as a result of the inherently racist criminal justice system in America. He should be taken off death row. He should have his conviction overturned, depending on who's doing the talking. It was appalling. And what happened was 27 years after the murder, and while Abu-Jamal had all the lawyers in the world and plenty of money, this gentleman who's been nominated to run the Civil Rights Division, Adegbile, he was running the legal department at the NAACP, and he chose to devote the considerable resources at his disposal there, the attorney's time and effort and work, to joining Mumia Abu-Jamal's cause. And it's just outrageous. This guy was an unrepentant murderer of a Philadelphia police officer. And here is Adegbile contributing to this notion that somehow he was railroaded, somehow he was unfairly treated, somehow this murderer ought not to be subject to the penalties that a perfectly legitimately constituted jury decided. I just think that shows very, very poor judgment, to say the least, and that's not the kind of person that we want running the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department.
So why does the president then nominate a guy like this that has all kinds of controversy around him because of those actions?
Because he's got a lot of fans on the far left. And why else, I couldn't explain, Gary. I think it's a very poor choice. I have made my views on this very, very clearly known to my colleagues. There is a vote today in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is the first major step in the confirmation process. I worry that he might pass out of committee with a majority vote. I think most, if not all, of the Democrats are going to support him. And I think that's a huge mistake. I'm not going to give up on this. If he does come out of committee, I'm going to fight this on the Senate floor. I just don't think we want someone who was actively inciting racial antagonism, someone who was completely misrepresenting the truth in this case. That kind of person should not be in charge in a position as important as the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department.
You know, I don't mean to make too long a jump over too far a chasm, but, you know, the president was asked the other night by Bill O'Reilly about fundamentally changing America, something that he said that he wanted to do back in his election campaign. And, you know, I look at some of the things like this, and I say, Is this the fundamental kind of change that we really want to America, getting these kind of people in place who helped a cop murder?
I just can't explain it, Gary. How it occurred to somebody at the White House that this guy was a good choice for this job, I'll not understand. But I can't understand, what we were talking about earlier, how it occurs to this administration that destroying 2.5 million jobs in America is good for America. It's inexplicable, Gary.
Yeah. Final thought, and we have about a minute left here, Senator. Another debt limit debate time coming up again. It's rather quiet right now, but what's going to come out of it? It seems like the president says, I want a clean debt, vote. And we keep on hearing that, and we wonder, why isn't the president leading to make sure that we don't have a clean debt vote, that we can actually do some other things along the way?
Yeah, because the president just wants to borrow and spend more. That's all. And I worry that that's what we're going to end up with. They might put some other riders on the debt ceiling increase, policy matters that the Democrats agree to, and I'm afraid that's where we're heading. I have argued from the beginning, as you probably remember, Gary, if we're going to raise the debt ceiling and incur still more debt and pile even more billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on the $17 trillion we already owe, at a minimum, can't we enact some reforms to begin to get this out-of-control spending under control? Is that really asking too much? Apparently it is, according to this president, and I worry that the House leadership is going to go along with it.
Well, the president deals with the Iranians. He has a tough time dealing with you guys, right?
But he can't sit down and discuss with us how we can curb out-of-control spending in the context of a debt ceiling increase.
And finally, obviously, shutting the government down didn't work too well last time for Republicans. Are there any alternatives that you see this time that could be used?
I think if the president, if Republicans were united on the simple idea that, Mr. President, before we agree to still more borrowing authority, we're going to insist on some spending discipline, and we're flexible about how we do it and where we go for it, and we will welcome, in fact, using some of the things that you, Mr. President, have claimed to have supported. If we insisted on that, I think the president would have to work with us.
There's an interesting oxymoron: finances in Washington and spending discipline.
Yeah.
Pat, appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Always a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Gary.